these different things. And I want to, next slide please, sorry, I'm used to pushing the button. Next slide please. That's good, stop. So what I want to talk about is a starting point at least, is web of connections, which, so I think the theme is link and relationships of this seminar, and talk mainly about how researchers are linked to the works and how that's important, and talk about broken records a bit and the problems with person names or author names, and then a couple of sort of main chunks there. Firstly, to talk about community-based efforts to tackle these identification challenges, and then introduce Orchid, who I work for, give a brief status update, and then sort of throw out a few thoughts about how researchers can participate or benefit from participating in this. And so I'm probably going to disappoint Mike a bit because I won't really talk that much about contributorship that he mentioned, but sort of touch on it and see where the discussion goes with that. And can I have the next slide, please? So let's start with a few examples of why it's important and how it's useful and necessary to identify or figure out who contributed to a given work. Some use cases here. And so this is a set of really brilliant diagrams put together by Jeff Builder, who's something of a thinker in this and an early leader in Orchid, and he's a great guy, and so I think he's fine with me ripping off his stuff. So just a few things there. There's this issue of if you have a given work, you want to know who is responsible for that, who authored that, and what kind of relationship that is, second, third, that final author and all that. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Oh, is that the next? Sorry. Yeah, and also, I mean, if you have that one person at hand as a contributor, I mean, you want to know what has that person done, and is it some coding, is it reviewing on a paper, authoring, whatever else, and what kind of work has that person done? And next slide, please. And the other way around, if you have a given piece of work, who actually did, who's connected with that work, what did they do on that work, and so this, and next slide please. And so finally, in terms of creating these networks of people, at least, if you have a given person in mind, a contributor, often you want to know how that person is connected with various other people, co-authors and others, or authors on papers that this person has maybe cited, and so on. And next slide please. And so all this stuff might sound like useless, but actually there's a lot of people who want to know some or all of this stuff. There's publishers who publish obviously the work of those researchers. They want to make sure that the author information is all right, deal with co-authors and all of that. Institutions that those researchers work for and are interested in evaluating quality and what their people do, track their works. Funders who fund the research, and obviously, as I'll come back to near the end, actual researchers who are doing the work. And next slide, please. So all of this relies obviously on these connections, these relationships being there between researchers, between authors and creators and their works. But this is proven to be more and more difficult to actually keep track of, because you have more and more works being authored, and you have more and more people actually contributing to them, different kinds of works. And finally, and this is sort of the focus of this first part, the issue of names and relying on names to pick up and identify authors. And next slide, please. And so this is just a quick slide just to tell you pretty much what everybody knows, I think, why names are problematic. This issue of one name, which refers to multiple persons, and this favorite example of mine, obviously John Smith, the classic one, and then this one that was mentioned in a Nature news piece just recently, the fact that Y. Wang has published some 4,000 papers just in 2011. That's clearly not the same person, that's clearly multiple persons going on there. And if that's the other way around, I mean, if you have one person with multiple names, then there's a problem of sort of collecting everything that person has done in different kinds of author names. And even me, I'm fairly unique in the scholarly literature, but I have some 3, 4, 5 different variations of my name, including the Icelandic version with special Icelandic letters. So there's a few things there that complicate things. And finally, transliterations of Chinese and Indian and other names into English. So now all this becomes really problematic. Next slide, please. And so the catchphrase of the day is that the scholarly record is broken. So all this difficulty of tracking who did what, who contributed to what, is really a huge problem there. And the consensus is generally that you really need unique IDs, person level identifiers to solve this stuff. It's a huge problem. Next slide, please. So how do we tackle this? How do we deal with these identification challenges? Next slide, please. And this is obviously what Orchid was created to do, and without going into this at great length, I'm assuming maybe most folks online are in some way aware of what's happening with this. And just briefly, Orchid is this international community-based organization focused on this very problem, tackling the ID problem in scholarly communication. And this was started initially in 2009. It became a non-profit incorporation in 2010. You can have a look at how that all works on the website. There's a URL there. And next slide, please. So the mission of this initiative and this organization is then to tackle those problems by creating infrastructure for unique identifiers for authors and other contributors, and to fix those issues with the scholarly record. And next slide, please. So I've given something similar to what I just said with it's before and after in the past couple of years when I've been involved in this initiative. So now actually I can finally stop saying it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, you're gonna love it, great. Now I can actually say that something has happened. And next slide, please. So 3 months ago, Orchid launched a live service, and now, as planned, obviously, anybody can come, and as a researcher or anybody else can come and register, get an account, get an ID, persistent, durable ID, and start managing their profile and do some other things. And last time I asked Laura and the technical director, I think we had some 50,000 people registered already. That was like 3 weeks ago. So I'm not sure how many there are now, but this is pretty nice, I think, for a really new and embryonic service. Next slide, please. So here's just an example profile. We can just have a look at this online, so I won't go into this much here. My profile with my ID there on the left, you can maybe not see that, but the main thing there is the list of works that I've authored. And so this is my Orchid profile, my sort of online identity through Orchid. Next slide, please. There's been a lot of interest, sort of predictably, in the launch and what followed, and this is just a quick look at the website traffic since that launch day, 0 day in October, and there's been a steady traffic of some thousands at least visits every day since then, and it's pretty nice that the people are really interested in this in the community. Okay, next slide, please. So the other really critical part of the launch and the service as it was constructed was not just the individual sort of end user side of it, but also the integration side. So through the API that was launched at the same time, the Orchid API, individuals and organizations and anybody really can use the API to connect, link their systems to Orchid to solve problems, which I'll go into next slide. So there's two things without going into the technical details too much. Whoops. Sorry, one back, please. Okay, sorry, a couple of slides back, please. Yep, there we go. So yeah, just briefly, forward one. Yeah, there we go. Stay. All right, so yeah, just a couple of brief points. There's the public API, which will be free to use for anybody, and you can use that to do lookup and searches and various other things with the information in the Orchid registry, which is quite useful for a lot of people. And then the other thing is the members API, which you need to be a membership, and then you need to be a member to use. And this is the advanced API, which has authentication, read-write access, and other things that you need to link up a third-party system to Orchid, and including for some create profiles for users. So I won't go too much into this, but just so you're aware of what went live in October. Next slide now, please. So now that the service is launched finally, now you can start to ask the question: what happens now, or what is happening now? Next slide, please. So first of all, in terms of the sort of high priority use cases that were on the table as ORCID was created, is this thing about improving and streamlining the workflow for publishers. This sort of typical scenario when researchers do some research, they write an article, and they need to publish it in a peer-reviewed journal. And so the idea is to use IDs to actually streamline this and make sure that you're not sort of bringing in errors there in the data, and allow publishers to do various link-ups in their system and solve a bunch of different problems relating to identifying authors. And to have this seamlessly integrate and link up with the ORCID registry at the end of the day. And I'll come back to a couple of those points later on. Next slide, please. And here's one of the earliest integrations. So Nature has this and a few other things done already, I think. So here is this typical page, which is going to be the fairly typical way of integrating with ORCID, where you have some kind of registration or a login page or an account sort of profile page where you can have a button or a link to allow you to link up your profile or pre-populate your profile with ORCID information or information retrieved from ORCID. Okay. Next slide, please. And one of the other main sort of use or sets of use cases for ORCID is this thing about how research organizations, universities and others, how they integrate and use ORCID to fix and problems and streamline things on their end by capturing identifiers for their staff, use that in their internal human resources record and whatever else, and use that to monitor what their people are publishing and so on, and do all these various different things that they either cannot do now or is hideously difficult and time-consuming to do and error-prone as well. So solving problems there and creating new possibilities as well. Next slide, please. But what I really want to leave you with and sort of cover now last two slides is not the organizational side of this, but the end user or the researcher side of it. What's in it for the researcher? And I have three sort of main points to focus on here. And first, to tell you that as you'll see once you start playing with the website, register and manage your profile, ORCID doesn't really do a lot by itself. It's a profile sort of system at first glance. You can add some publications and all that, but it doesn't really do much more or anything that others like Mendeley or Google Scholar doesn't do. And the real key here and the value proposition, the value that will come from ORCID is the integration side, how that will link up with and is being linked up with other third-party systems. And the first sort of set or first issue concerning benefit is this thing about integration by these traditional players, so publishers, funders, institutions, and those many if not most of these prominent ones in research are actually already on board and have bought into the concept of ORCID the past couple of years, and they're, if not already begun, then will soon begin to integrate their systems and get ORCID IDs into their workflows, embedded in their workflows. And so the benefit will be sort of interacting in a way for researchers, because they, just by their interactions with those traditional players, when they submit manuscripts, apply for grants, and so on, if they, yes, sorry. Yeah. And so if they do get an ID and use that to interact with those services, they get the benefit of sort of more accurate data, streamlined interactions, etc., less form filling, and at the end of the day saves people time. And that's really something, at least for me personally, I'm looking forward to, not having to fill out 10 different forms everywhere I go. And that's one of those kinds of integrations is there in the Scopus ORCID wizard that you can try out. That's a good example of how that's beneficial to both author and commercial service. Okay. Next slide, please. So the other main thing, and this is the bit that I personally find more interesting than the traditional sort of established stuff, is that's ORCID integration from new or emerging players. And this is the kind of thing that I think ORCID might be a key factor in actually enabling and facilitating these creating new opportunities and innovative things by, among others, these small-scale, very diverse, different kinds of scholarly services, Mendeley and other things like that, who actually can benefit a lot. So the services themselves from using ORCID and using it as a platform, but also bring benefit to the researchers who use them to help them create these new...
So I have to take a couple now.
Okay. So help them create these new connections between themselves and their work, and in particularly when it comes to these new alternative kinds of research outputs like datasets, like Wikipedia articles, code on GitHub, and things like that, to create links from those works to themselves and publicize that and expand their network in that way. And ultimately, I'm hoping, get credit for those things as they're assessed for impact and all that. And this is something that we'll hear more about from Heather, I guess. So, okay. And also, just a quick point here on the contributorship thing. I'm kind of hoping that, can I go back one, please? Yeah, so one sort of tangential point here is that I'm hoping that with these kinds of services and this kind of infrastructure, we can start to capture not just this link between a person and the work or works that he or she has actually done or contributed to, but how they contributed to this, whether they authored, analyzed, or whatever else. So the next slide, please. Okay, so the third main point I want to leave you with. This is something that that requires a bit of a backstory, I guess. So I do some part-time work doing support for a research institution in Iceland with some 40, 50 odd academics, and I do various kind of web-related things for them, manage an institutional website, and trying to get them to get more of a sort of prominent web presence, to put the publication listings online, and not so much use Twitter straight away, but more like getting it to this level of putting them themselves in a minimal kind of usable way on the web. And what I've been sort of coming across with maybe 8 or 9 out of 10 of those guys, they either don't know really what's going on. Yeah, they know what the web is, they use it, but they sort of haven't grasped this importance of being on there as a scholar, as an academic on the website. And most will have some minimal sort of academic sort of standard issue website web page, maybe with publication listing hidden in a Word document somewhere. It's just hideous. So there's the odd 1 or 2 out of 10 that has their own personal standalone website, which tends just to suck and be very sort of non-useful, basically. So one of the things that I think Orchid can help with this year is to bring up that sort of level of presence for those people who aren't really aware of how you can use and take advantage of the web in your research, to use that as a springboard to sort of get more connected and become part of a network, using their Orchid profile and as that kind of a central hub, at least to begin with, and then see if they want to use some other services as well. And I think that this would make it vastly easier for more kind of, I guess, web-savvy people like myself to tell them, not here's like 10 different profile services and our local institution service and the university thing. You need to sort of look at all of that and choose which one to use. I want to say, go and use Orchid as a kind of central springboard to get started with this stuff, to get to the same level as everybody else. And also, by the way, that service actually is supported by publishers and these various other players that you interact with regularly in your work. So that's where I think Orchid can come in a strong way. And I think this is important because this brings more people, more academics to the web, and makes them more visible, so others can read and build on the work, etc. Create collaborations and all that. And just a generally good thing to be more visible on the web. Okay. Next slide, please. Yeah. So that's a picture of Facebook from my page of my mom. I need to explain. I know. So I put her up there because so she's over 60, right? And she uses Facebook. She started using it a couple of years ago. And I put this up here because I found it a bit amazing to be stumbling up against this block, talking to academics locally who just clearly didn't see any point, or at least hadn't thought about it, how you can use the web to disseminate work and promote themselves in research and professional work. Well, at the same time, 9.5 out of 10 of those people, they use Facebook daily. Like something like 90% of Icelanders are on Facebook. 95% are online. So I'm thinking, if my mom can do this, get online and use this to interact and sort of and do useful things, then surely even the more sort of web challenged academics can do so. Possibly with the help of Orchid being a kind of a pervasive community norm kind of infrastructure, if you like. And that's where I see Orchid maybe going and helping to create a scholarly network, I guess. I think that's it. I'm well under time. Thanks for your attention. This was great. And I hope you liked it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mumi. The point that you were making about the focus of network technology is a very good one that, as you probably heard, came up in the first session of our seminar. We were talking about the purpose and the aim and the ambition of certain social tools, and where you, in Greg's terms, say no to expanding it. I've had a number of questions from people on the functionality that's incorporated in Orchid, and whereabouts, whether this is intended to replace platforms that already exist or augment the environment. So I'd like some comments on where you see the hard edges, if you like, of the core Orchid platform compared to what you hope will be developed using the interfaces that Orchid has developed around its platform. The other point that occurred to me was it refers to some research that I've been undertaking recently that indicates there's quite a large discrepancy between the extent to which academics use the internet to research other academics and the extent to which they feel that other academics are interested in their work. And it's quite a large discrepancy. It looks to me as if it's in the order of 15%. So in the favour of nearly everybody uses the internet to find academics, but there is a drop-off of 15% of people who think that other academics are interested in their work, which I think is quite an interesting insight into the minds of, as you describe, academics who have quite low-quality web presences. But first of all, if I could have your comments on those edges of the Orchid service, that would be really interesting to hear.
Yeah, sure. So obviously it's only been around for a few months now, and it's being improved like week by week. And you can follow along what's happening on the website. There's a community site, support.orchid.org, and you can follow new ideas, new feature requests, that kind of thing, and latest things that have come in and been added feature-wise or are coming. And I think lot of the basic functionality is there. I think what we're maybe missing is a few strategically placed sort of social networking tools, interactions. There may be, there was some kind of Twitter button, maybe Twitter interaction feature would do wonders. I'm just kind of doubtful about the Facebook connection myself, but a few of those sort of, smartly placed interaction tools would do good. I can't really put a finger on exactly how it would work, but I think Twitter would be probably the number one thing to focus on, at least to experiment with this stuff. I'm not sure what else I could tell you on this. Connections with the major sort of research portals like SSRN, in terms of more specialized portals, Mendeley for the more generic, all-encompassing portals, those spring to mind. And those kinds of tools, I guess, Site2Like maybe, but not. You can't really take everything and link up with everything. That would be useless. So I think there has to be a pick and choose approach there, a strategic sort of selection of how you connect Orchid to these social sort of research platforms.
So that there is an extent to which you could say that it's very much up to these other platforms to come to Orchid to do the integration, rather than for Orchid to be reaching out to them. Is that your view?
I think so, yeah. Because I think this has come up in discussions of both open and in just between some colleagues. It would be nice if you had all these 100 or 1,000 platforms linked up, but certainly if Orchid has to implement all of that, then we'll never be done. So it has to be from the other side, and I think Mr. Gunn has talked about this with us, I think, when he was saying, well, Orchid should do the integration, and we were saying, no, Mendeley should do the integration.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if he finally caught the point, but I'm hoping he'll see our sort of perspective.
Well, thank you very much. That was really helpful, and that's answered. We had a lot of questions specifically coming in along the lines of how do I integrate my application, my platform with Orchid. There is a developmental website. I think there is a link on the orchid.org website that will take you through to a place that helps you with integration issues.
The main
a little.
Okay. Just
a little note.
Yeah. Am I muted? Never mind.
Okay. need to apologize to viewers rather than listeners, because we had some audio outage during the first 2 minutes of my introduction, so you've missed listening to my words of wisdom on the soundtrack of the best of the 80s that you were listening to during the intermission. And you also missed my introduction to Dr. Gudmunder Thorisson of the University of Iceland, Orchid and Odin. Thank you very much, Mumi.